Good morning. I'm Bonnie Gardner, co-chair of the Public Affairs Forum of the First Unitarian Universalist Church of Austin at 4700 Grover Avenue. Our forums are free and open to the public and happen most Sundays at noon. For more information on our public affairs forums, you can go to our website at www.austinuu.org. And now Dale Beulah will introduce today's speaker, Brewster McCracken. Dale?
Welcome, everyone. This is the fourth in a series of forums co-sponsored by our First Unitarian Green Sanctuary Committee. As you remember, we had composting in January. In February, we had rainwater harvesting and native plants. Today, we're doing climate change, and next month, we'll be doing the Nature Conservancy. So we hope you'll join us for these co-sponsored events. One other Green Sanctuary event will be March the 22nd. We'll be showing Switch, the movie, here at church with alternative energy as its primary focus. So Brewster is here today to share things along that same line. He is the executive director of the Pecan Street project here in Austin, which is a smart grid research and commercialization consortium that's headquartered at UT. He was invited by the government of Japan recently to present on their one-year anniversary co-conference for the reconstruction of Fukushima. He's been elected twice as our city council member. He's served as board member for Austin Energy and has founded and chaired the city's Emerging Technologies Committee. He has also led the city's collaboration with the University of Texas to establish our technology incubators. And he's practiced commercial litigation for nearly a decade. He has honors of graduation from Princeton University and the University of Texas Law School, and holds a master's in public affairs from the LBJ School. So he's quite capable, and is going to share some new data with us on some of the things we are discovering about the efficiency of energy and how climate doesn't have to be on the downhill path. We can all have a role in bringing it up. After he's finished, we'll have handouts at the back on climate issues, so please stop off and pick up something. Brewster, come and share with us.
Thanks, Dale. Well, thanks for having me. We're going to see some research results today from the work we've been doing with a lot of folks, including some of you here in this room today, on how we use electricity and natural gas. And so why don't we go ahead and dive right in. And what you're going to see is some research results that have not been public to date that give us some, I think, very hopeful things to learn about ways that the impact we have in our own lives can be reduced, how we can save money. And anyway, it's a lot about energy, the impacts of energy efficiency, rooftop solar panels, and things that we can do on a personal and community-based level. So just a little bit about us. Pecan Street, we do two things, research and commercialization, which since we're headquartered at a research university, that's why. In other words, we do what a university does, and we were founded with some seed funding from the Cockrell School of Engineering at the University of Texas as one of the founding organizations, so we mirror that. So it's about 95% research is what we do. So we have 16 full-time employees now. We're nonprofit. So the Research Institute is what carries out the research activities. The Pike Powers Lab and Center for Commercialization, which formally opens in May, but we've been actually renting a house to carry out residential levels of research on product testing before we'd ever have it put it in anybody's home. So this has all actually been going on for a little over a year now. Some milestones. We have the nation's, from a research data perspective, there's never been anything like this for universities. Primarily the University of Texas, but not exclusively. In fact, the University of Texas has asked our organization to create pathways for research universities around the U.S. to collaborate with them so that this can have some more scale. We're actually expanding our work into other communities as well. We've already begun expanding our research into Dallas-Fort Worth, Houston, and Corpus Christi. And I think I'm more than modestly optimistic. I'm fairly optimistic that we're going to have some other cities and other states in some point this spring or summer. So just on a scale, we are, from a data management perspective, operating at the level of a utility that has nearly 3.75 million customers. That's kind of the scale of activities from data management we have. Actually, these two microphones are... So we have the world's first independent research meter network. I think something interesting is that here in Austin, Texas, through our research and through the people participating, including the Beulahs, and I think I saw Tori Camp here a second ago, but and maybe some others of you, we have the nation's highest residential concentration of electric cars. 69 total, including 50 in 1/3 of 1 square mile in the Mueller community. But then folks like myself and the Beulahs and others who don't live in Mueller are also part of this research as well. So let's find out what's going on. So first off, we do primarily residential research. We're going to be expanding into apartments next month. We've actually begun expanding into churches and small businesses already as well. But the bulk of our research focuses on what's happening in the home level. And here's why. So this is from ERCOT. This is just a one afternoon comparison of 2 afternoons, actually. March 9th, 2011, August 3rd, 2011. And so what you see is that on a spring afternoon, the large commercial and industrial, the factories, major commercial users, they were accounting for almost 44% of total electricity use. And residential accounts for, on a spring afternoon, 27%, 27.4%. But by the summertime, what happens is, in terms of overall use and in terms of percentage of use, residential on a summer afternoon rises to over 50% of total electricity use in Texas at least. And I think this is what we'll find is probably a pretty common shift. You're going to see what's behind that. But in other words, residential matters, and it matters a lot. So what happens in our homes is driving the number of power plants that are built and driving carbon output, and it accounts for most of the change over the course of a year in electricity use. So this is what a utility may see if it has smart meters. So this is midnight to midnight, and this is one home. This is my home, actually. So you'll see me speaking with a little more authority about what's going on here in a second, because I was actually making sure I was chronicling what was going on. But this is 0 watts to 7,000 watts. So this is how electricity changes. This is a pretty typical day among homes. What you see from a 1 hour perspective over the night, this is July 31st, 2012, is that electricity use is on and during the night, and we'll see why that is, and I think we'll have a pretty good idea. And then there's one of 2 basic profiles of what happens during the day. For people who are away from the home during the day and who have programmable thermostats, this happens. And then you'll see some different patterns from other homes in a little bit. But then we get home and things start turning on. And so what is it? Well, utilities have actually never known. I mean, they've had some good guesses in some ways, but this is what their data systems see at their highest performing levels. They cannot tell a whole lot. But as they look at this and say, okay, well, how could we avoid building power plants, or how could we reduce carbon output, or more reliably meet customer needs? And their tools are green building, behavior response. And behavior response means tools that would say, do this, and have a predictable behavioral response by a customer in response. That's typically, but not exclusively, going to be price changes. And but there are some other tools also. Something as simple as a text message saying, hey, we're having a grid emergency. Can you turn off something? Appliance efficiency standards. And then feedback systems, something that tells you if something isn't working well. A classic feedback system is going to be a check engine light on a car. That tells you that there's something going wrong in your car. The check engine lights really didn't exist until about 20 years ago, unless something had really catastrophically gone wrong. But now our cars are marvels of information technology with more computing power in them than the most powerful personal computers available 20 years ago. And in fact, actually, interestingly, almost all the chips and the computing chips that go into cars are actually made here in Austin, Texas, by Freescale primarily. It turns out that these tools, though, don't work the same for all of the issues that are going on in the home. So understanding the tools and understanding what the jobs are people are trying to get done make a difference. So the information utilities have always had have actually not have made these fairly imprecise tools. So let's look. There are actually 4 types of ways that we as people use electricity in our homes. There's the always-on category, the thermal category, electric gas substitutes, a real specialized category, and then intentionally, the things that we intentionally turn on and off when we're home. This is whole home electricity use, and this is the portion of whole home electricity use that is the always-on category. And this primarily consists of refrigerator, that's the bumps, and then what we call vampire load, but also just things that are always on in people's homes, Wi-Fi router, cable box, the little clocks that are on our microwave oven and our bedside table clocks, right? And these things, it turns out, as you'll see, don't actually use a whole lot of electricity. Over the course of a year, the always-on things are meaningful, but they don't, on a summer day, and actually over the course of a year, don't account for a very big chunk of our electricity use. And so this is a small version. Now let's blow it up to see what it is that's actually going on. So the dark green line are the cable box Wi-Fi router portion of whole home electricity use. So what you see here is, remember, 7,000 watts was that previous. That's at scale. So I just blew it up. So this is 200 watts. So at least in our house, and homes vary based on how many of the always-on things you have. Like a class, we don't have a cable box. But if you have a cable box, that'll be about 300 watts. So that would add it up to right about here, right? And then, but you see this, the jump up and down are the refrigerator portion, light green. So this is the 2 basic categories, like the little clocks and cable boxes and Wi-Fi routers, and then the refrigerator, which is always on. But now here's an interesting thing. But at 8 in the morning, the cycles are brought fatter. And then again at about between 7 and 8 o'clock at night, they spike up and get broader too. What's going on at 7 in the morning and 7 at night? Dinner and breakfast, right? And it turns out our refrigerators betray us in a way, right? They show that they actually have a different use pattern over the course of those times when we're actually opening refrigerators at the same time we're cooking. You'd kind of expect to see this. It's interesting to see it, right? But the refrigerator is the major always-on user of electricity in this category. It'll account in our research for about 10 to 11% of total annual electricity use. And so as we look at the options for reducing the electricity use in that always-on category, so green building, what is green building? Green building is basically anything you can get done at Home Depot or from a contractor. So more insulation, solar shading, fix your ducts, put seals along the bottom of your doors. It's pretty unexotic, non-high-tech, you can do it right now kind of stuff. And so, but it turns out that a green building, because it's about insulation and it's about sealing your ducts in the bottom of your doors and putting solar shading, so green building is not about things that are on the always-on category like the Wi-Fi router or the refrigerator. So green building is not a tool, as a general matter, that addresses the always-on category. Behavior response stuff. Behavior response says, let me send you some kind of signal, whether it's a text message or a higher price or something, and then you would then use less electricity at that precise moment. That is the concept behind the behavior response tool. And again, because the always-on category, stuff that's always on, behavior response is going to be kind of an ineffective tool generally on the always-on category because these things are always on for a reason. It would be quite inconvenient to turn off your refrigerator for 2 hours at 5 in the afternoon. And in fact, it may be that the only way one would become aware that one needs to turn something off would be because you have a Wi-Fi router. And if you unplug the Wi-Fi router when you're always on, you would then lose the information needed to tell you need to turn something off. So kind of a paradox there, right? So the behavior response tool is also not going to, as a general matter, be a very useful tool. Appliance standards. Appliance standards are, Energy Star ratings. That's what matters here, right? So the thing that just drives all of us who look at our research data completely nuts is seeing how energy inefficient cable boxes are. We know that the Scientific Atlanta cable boxes that all the cable companies provide is for the companies that do that. Those things, they use somewhere in the neighborhood of 2 to 3 times as much electricity constant as a refrigerator when it's peak cycling. So it's refrigerator will go from like 14 to 150, 14 to 150, 1450, that kind of a deal, right? So a cable box will be 300 constant. So we know from things like smartphones that it is possible for a high-tech device to remain connected to a network, but only be on when it is being used, and then to shut off. So when we say for an appliance efficiency standard for cable boxes to act like more like smartphones, we know that because smartphones do it. So that would be an example of something that policymakers and others who could address appliance standards, that would be what the difference makers are there. And then you have feedback systems that tell you if something's broken. Now, going back, feedback systems would also be kind of useful because, as we saw from here, when you have these broad bumps, if you have something that has gone wrong with your refrigerator, as an example, or if you've even left the door open, a software could conceivably pick up that something's gone wrong here because it doesn't look like this. And so feedback systems would tell you, hey, you left your refrigerator door open, or your refrigerator compressor is running at a far different level of activity than usual. Something's wrong. Fix it. A check engine light or an OnStar for a refrigerator, as an example. So that would be a pretty useful tool for the always-on category. Thermal category. Orange is air conditioner. Thermal is air conditioning, right? And then in the winter, heating. So what you see is, as a portion of whole home electricity use, thermal, when it's on, is a really big source of home electricity use. It turns out it's about, you'll see more about this a little bit later, but thermal accounts for over 50% of annual electricity use in the non-green built homes, and then about 40% in the green built homes. And it is, as I said, over the course of the day when it's on, it is a major driver. So it's really, so it's 50, a little bit over 50%, and I'll actually have the precise figures here in a second, but it's like 51.2% or something like that for the non-green built homes, and it's a little bit over 40% of annual electricity use for the green built homes. So, but here's an interesting facet of it. Okay. Okay, good. Okay. Thermal, like air conditioning, it turns out is not used for 5+ months a year. So what we're talking about is a whole lot of electricity use over the course of the year, concentrated even in Austin, Texas, in a kind of a small number of months, as opposed to, say, a refrigerator, which is 365 days a year generally. So let's look at this kind of on a blown-up scale. What you see is the thermal on the air conditioning side, at least, is two things. It's the compressor and the air handler. And you'd expect to see this, but you do. They come on at precisely the same time. And so, at least in the example of this house, my house, it's about 2,500 watts from the compressor, and then about 800 watts from the air handler. So these things come on in tandem. In the winter, if you have electric heat, you would see the air handler come on, and then you also see the electric heat. If you have gas heat, you'll just see the signal for the air handler because the gas portion is from gas. So as we look at this in the tools, green building, behavior response, appliance standards, and feedback systems. Green building. Can you reduce this or impact this with green building? Well, yeah. When we talk about green building is overwhelmingly focused on this, right? So, in other words, learning thermostats, more insulation, radiant barriers, solar shading, better sealing of your ducts, basically the stuff you can get done at Home Depot or Lowe's. That's what green building is, and it's targeted to this. And we'll show you in a second why this is a huge issue, even bigger than this suggests. Behavior response would look at, in addition to having insulation and things like that, could you also reduce electricity use at certain points of the day through some sort of signals like, hey, we have a grid emergency. And yeah, that's a tool that's available to this because it tends to be that the times when we'd have things like grid emergencies are times when the electricity use has been driven up by thermal reasons. So it is aligned with that. Appliance standards make an enormous difference. Things that we can do to have higher efficiency ratings on compressors have outsized impacts on anything else that goes on. So efficiency standards on air conditioning systems and heating systems makes an enormous difference. And then feedback systems, the OnStar or check engine lights. Again, if this was going on 24/7 like this, that would be a sign there was a problem, right? It would mean that you had a coolant leak or something was wrong with your compressor. So feedback systems would be important. But feedback systems could also tell you if you have duct leakage, as an example. We found out that in the green-built homes, that the number one problem that emerged was because of lack of feedback systems, duct leakage in new homes. And it kind of makes sense, right? You go up in the attic one time and something gets bumped. And maybe it's somebody as a contractor. Maybe even the people who installed the insulation, as sometimes happen, bumped the ducts. And so, but without a feedback system, there's actually no information to tell someone that their ducts are leaking because that tends to be an invisible issue that is up in the attic typically, or at the compressor on the outside of the house or the apartment. So feedback systems are a really important tool, particularly given how much of our entire electrical system is driven by sizing for heating and cooling. So let's look at this. This is some comparison then on green-built versus non-green-built homes in our research. So interestingly, as you'd expect, during the parts of the year where we're not using air conditioning, the green-built and non-green-built homes were basically using the same amount of electricity. The good news is they weren't using very much because it's the non-cooling. On the parts of the year where we're using more cooling, a big delta opens up. And we'll show you precisely how much in a few slides. But needless to say, in other words, this stuff works and it makes a difference. And it is actually, turns out from our research, even the people who worked in this field were surprised by what a big difference it made when you actually started adding the numbers up on the impact of insulation and duct leakage and things like this. So now, let's go back to, this is a special category, and it's electric gas substitute. So it turns out that there are 4 appliances that we have in a home that you could either go electric or you could go gas. Water heater, air heating or space heating, the clothes dryer, and the oven, the big 4. So one of those, water heating, it's also pretty feasible to go with solar water heating. And then with oven and space heating, the tools just aren't there at the moment. So there are a lot of things to be done. But as a general matter, these 4 types of appliances are ones for which there are an available electric or gas substitute if you live in an area with natural gas service as opposed in addition to electricity service. So this is gas dryer. And this is a gas dryer, a cycle, run 1 load of laundry in the course of a day. That's how it compares in terms of total home electricity use over the course of the day. But then what we did is we substituted the data from an electric dryer that same time. What we got was this. So instead of 7,000 or 7 watts, we went up to 12,000 watts to accommodate what a big spike in the electric oven and the electric dryer happened. So we actually had an almost total doubling of household electricity use when the electric dryer was on. This is one run of an electric dryer, and then this is the same run with a gas dryer. So what you see is the electric dryer, for starters, is running about twice as long as the gas dryer. And then this is the electricity portion. I'll show you the apples-to-apple electric plus gas in the next slide. But let's talk about what is happening when one is using electricity for thermal applications, in other words, to create heat. It was using electricity to heat water, to heat air, to heat the air in a dryer, or to heat an oven. First off, a power plant somewhere 40 to 100 miles away or more is roaring into life to boil water. And if it's a coal plant, it's burning coal to do it. If it's a gas plant, it's burning gas. It is boiling water to create steam, to move a turbine, and to create electricity. And that electricity's voltage is stepped up and is put onto those big wires we see along the highways, transmission lines, and it'll run 40 to 100 or more miles. And electricity is dissipating and being lost every inch it travels along those transmission lines. And then it gets into a community. It goes to the substation. Substation is kind of like the exit ramp for a highway. The voltage is stepped down to the substation and moved into your neighborhood at a lower voltage. And then it gets to the transformer, which is almost like the stoplight to turn onto the street in your neighborhood. And then at that point, it is stepped down again into your home, where it's stepped down again, and then it is reconverted back into heat. Option 2, put a flame under the water or the air. Okay, that's the point that you're consuming it. So from a carbon impact and from an efficiency impact, it's a little bit unsurprising in some respects that using electricity to create heat is a wildly more inefficient use of electricity than using a thermal application at the site, whether it's burning wood or using a natural gas pilot light. But from a cost perspective then, so electric dryer and gas dryer, one load from an electric dryer is 38 cents. That's still actually pretty phenomenally cheap. There's a lot of non-externalized costs not incorporated in that, but 38 cents to run a load of laundry with an electric dryer, and then 6 cents combined gas and electric with the gas dryer. So as we look at the things that are in the next stages of activities, a general thing, a takeaway from this is from an environmental and cost effectiveness standpoint that using gas appliances as opposed to electric appliances, with the one caveat that water heating has a third option, which is solar water heating. But as a general matter, the environmental and cost impact of gas appliances over electric is pretty dramatic. So basically, we're looking at appliance standards and appliance choices here in the substitute category. Let's look at intentional. And intentional is this is the everything that we turn on intentionally. So it basically is you have to be home as a general matter for intentional stuff to go on unless you have some kind of automated switch. But as you see, it's really tied to behavior. Like when no one's home, there's really not any of the intentional stuff going on. It's all based on when we're home. Like in our case at night, on this summer night, it was ceiling fans, basically. That's what's going on. But let's break that down. So it turns out there's a whole lot of individual stuff going on there. So again, this is 0 to 7,000 watts. Let's blow it up. And what you see this is all the stuff of our lives. Right? This is turning on the TV, turning on lights, turning off lights, using a coffee machine or a dishwasher. And so what there's a whole lot going on there. And so it may be that 95% of the devices that use electricity in our homes are in the intentional category. And as an aggregate matter, they don't use a whole lot. I mean, this is 500 watts out of 7,000 max. But what you see is there's a lot of stuff going on in there. That suggests, by the way, that one of the uses for these high-resolution data systems would be to use your electricity use information as a home security tool. Because only when you're home should this be happening as a general matter, particularly in this diversity. And in fact, one of the ways we came to that insight is my wife Sarah and I, and kids were in San Antonio over Thanksgiving. On Saturday after Thanksgiving, looked at our research participant website in Pecan Street and saw that at 3 in the afternoon, 90 miles to the north, lights and plugs started roaring to life at 50 to 100 watts at a time, and we were 90 miles to the south. So I run in there to Sarah and I'm like, someone's in our home. And she said, well, how do you know? I said, look, and I held up the web portal from our electricity use. And she goes, oh, yeah, the maid's here today. I'm like, oh, yeah, Saturday after Thanksgiving, of course, But I learned that insight from our electricity use, not from a home security system. So as we look at the intentional category and say, what are the tools? Green building is, as a general matter, not going to be impacted by that because, again, that's deciding to turn on and off things like TVs and lights. Behavior response is, please don't turn something on or off. Well, that would be a tool for this. Appliance standards, the big one. Light bulbs, right? Let's put this in a 100-watt light bulb doesn't produce, that's not a standard of lighting, that's the standard of electricity use. A 15-watt LED light bulb produces the same amount of light as a 100-watt incandescent light bulb. So it is somewhere in the neighborhood of 6x more electricity to produce the same amount of light. It is additive. If you have 5 100 light bulbs on, you are using 500 watts of electricity when you could be using, 75 watts from 5. Similarly, the same level of lighting from 5 LED light bulbs. And the other thing to note about light bulbs is incandescent light bulbs burn at 200 degrees. Operate at 200 degrees. They produce 200 degrees of heat per bulb, whereas LED light bulbs are skin temperature, somewhere 98 to 100 degrees. So you can touch an LED light bulb. You'll burn your finger if you touch it with an incandescent, which means that your air conditioning systems are also working harder because they're having to cool 200 degrees of heat that is pumping out of a per light bulb basis. So that's why, in particular, the appliance standards and lighting make a big difference because we may have 100 or more light bulbs in our homes. So then you see seasonal variation of electricity use. Summer is where the biggest change. Fall and spring are almost identical in our research. And then winter is the lowest level of electricity use. But let's break this out a little bit more. By category, summer, fall, winter, and spring. So in other words, we grouped fall and winter together because they're fall and winter in this case are almost identical. But what you see is air conditioner, clothes dryer, dishwasher, microwave, refrigerator, washing machine. All of these have virtually no change over the course of the year. The change is driven by the air conditioner. And what that reflects is that the total size of our electricity system globally is driven by the external climate. There is an uncomfortable follow-on if we are having to build bigger electrical systems so that it's because it's hot outside and it gets hotter outside, then we need to make bigger electrical systems. That reminds me of the people that leave the refrigerator door open hoping to cool off. The problem is it becomes kind of a self-defeating process, right? So this is this. Let's look at the research results and findings. So biggest one, thermal consumption is the largest use category. Over 50% of annual electric use in non-green built homes. Compared to non-green built homes, green built homes used 45% less electricity for cooling. This is dramatic. This was bigger than expected, a lot bigger than expected. But most of us don't live in new green built homes. We live in older homes. What can we do? Old homes with retrofits, the Home Depot kind of stuff, we're using 25.5% less electricity for cooling. big differences. If you want to be ready for this summer, go get some more insulation. It'll cost you a couple $100, and it'll save you that, and you'll be more comfortable. So duct leakage and more insulation, solar shading on your windows. You can install that yourself. Those are the big three. So what are in the Greenbelt homes, what correlates the level of electricity use? So in the Greenbelt homes, they're all pretty efficient. So we're getting some almost non-structural reasons for differences in home electricity use. If you went from 1 to 2 adults, that accounted for a 38.7% increase in Greenbelt homes. The tons of the HVAC have the second largest explained difference. The bigger your air conditioner in a Greenbelt home, the more that explained the changes in electricity use. The amount of square foot of windows explained also an increase. But that's Greenbelt. In other words, these homes were all performing in a pretty narrow window. The non-Greenbelt homes, we had all over the map. So the attic R value of the insulation. If you went from 22 to 33, you had less electricity use. The age of your HVAC, if you had an older HVAC, heating, ventilation, air conditioning, you had more electricity use. Duct leakage percentage accounted for nearly 11% higher electric use on average. So the big users of electricity in our homes: electric dryer over 6 kW, pool pump 4. Electric dryer is 50% higher in electricity use when it's on than the next highest thing in our homes. And pool pump is number 2 at over 4 kW. Air conditioner compressor around 4. Electric oven is 4th. So 2 of the top 4 electric users when they're on are those electric gas substitutes. It's interesting. But electric vehicles came in 5th place, surprisingly. And that's the 240 volt, 3.3. And that's the washer dryer level or air conditioner level of voltage. And then if you want to plug into a standard outlet, that's how much of electricity you're drawing. And then the last one is the air handler. So, big takeaway. The big takeaway on this is a warmer climate will increase demand for thermal in the thermal category, but what we're seeing is outsized differences when you do things that are easy to do on a personal level.
Thank you. And do we have questions? Okay, we have a question from Chris. Will you stand up and say your name?
Yeah, my name is Chris Kellogg. I have a house in Iowa that was retrofitted with ducts that are just like a spring, plastic. So they're round, but they're not insulated, and there's no air conditioning needs up there. But what I'm wondering is, square ducts, are they as efficient as a round duct when they're insulated?
Yeah, I don't know the answer to that. The one thing we've been looking at are ducts that have holes in them or have come unsealed. I mean, that has been the question of efficiency. I don't really see an inherent reason why a round versus square duct would be a difference of efficiency, although the round ducts may suggest that if they're kicked, for instance, would move as opposed to open.
We have a question here. Would you stand and say your name?
Hi, I'm Trish O'Day, and I wondered if you had thoughts or comments about the responsibility of landlords in our area. I work with low-income families and through family resource centers at some of the middle schools here in town, and a family will come in with a $400 or $500 or $600 electricity bill during the summer, and they haven't been keeping the windows and doors open. It's just because the houses are so drafty.
Yeah.
Do you have any thoughts?
Yeah, so Tricia, you've gotten exactly why we are going to be doing the first ever research ever on how people in apartments, and these are low income, we're doing this in foundation communities, 60 to 120 apartment units. Half the participants speak Spanish as a first language, and we're creating a Spanish language portal to meet the needs for the participants who are volunteering the research who speak Spanish as a first language. It is very difficult to do research on how people use electricity in apartments because you're investing a fair amount of money and resources to install it, and you want to really have it in there at least 2 years. And that doesn't work well with the rental cycles and apartments. But thanks to Foundation Communities, which has part of their mission, which is different from a classic landlord, part of Foundation Communities' mission is to be looking out for the people who are their residents. I mean, they're not just trying to make a buck off them. They're not trying to make a buck. They're trying to provide housing at an affordable rate. So with that, we're going to be developing the first ever research on how people are using electricity in apartments on a minute-to-minute basis down to the individual appliance or circuit level. Our suspicion is that, or our hypothesis, is going to be that information can be very empowering for residents of apartments because they don't have the ability without information to control what happens. But with information would come power. So the next time that we will visit, we will have the first of its kind research anywhere in the U.S., maybe the world, on what's happening in people's apartments. And that focus is going to be an apartment. The interesting thing is, with Foundation Communities, one of the apartment buildings is old and non-retrofitted. Another building is old and retrofitted. A third building is brand new, M Street Station. And then the fourth one is not Foundation Communities, but is the Wildflower Community senior housing in the Miller community. So we're going to have a really fascinating diversity of research that will all be of the first of its kind.
Raise your hands high so we can see you. Richard Halpin.
Thank you, Bonnie.
And
thank
good
you,
to see you, man.
You are a visionary, and you really have fought every day to try to bring intelligence to our energy use and new ways of doing things. So thank you from all of us. Yeah. So you mentioned several things today that we're using a lot of electricity for that I'm not sure there are standards about, like cable and light bulbs and vents. And so is there any way to do better in our policy work around those kinds of things to set up more incentive ways or better ways so that we can use a lot less electricity in those and related areas? And thanks again for doing all your good work.
I'm going to show you one reason why when we hear, some of these files are so big. You're going to have access to all, by the way, this is pool pump, impact on whole home electricity use, this electric car. I want to show you a specific slide of why this is in the self-interest. By the way, this is the difference on the standards home-to-home on air conditioner compressors, 8 different homes, same day. But let's get to this. This is a real fascinating slide here. So even Austin Energy and San Antonio CPS, which are municipal utilities in Texas, every utility, including the municipals, their power plants operate on the statewide called nodal market. And the prices on the wholesale level set every 15 minutes. So this is from August of 2011. And what it shows is that the average price across all 31 days of August for wholesale electricity that utilities paid for was $850 a megawatt hour at 4 p.m. And the break-even price for utilities was about $60. Yeah. So this is not something where we simply have to wait on Washington, D.C., although the Environmental Protection Agency administration has done a good job on the setting of efficiency standards and ratings on air conditioners. But even Austin Energy has been a real pioneer on this, using building codes to incentivize higher efficiency ratings. And I think that one of the things we can take away from this is that we are doing right and doing well at the same time. Because doing right, reducing electricity use in summer when ozone levels are highest and the costs are the highest, also has the salutary impact that it makes Austin Energy and all other utilities more profitable. Utilities in Texas that can sell less electricity on a summer afternoon are more profitable. They would have sorely liked to have sold less electricity because they were having to buy extra electricity in the wholesale market at $850 and turn around and sell it for $60. That is not called a sustainable business model. Yeah.
No.
Yes.
Let's take a question back here, please. Would you stand and say your name?
I'm Bob Murray, and Brewster, as an old engineer, I can tell you how refreshing it is to actually have data. There have been more examples of people doing the best they could, but until you actually see the data that you're producing in the project, you're really just flying in the dark. There's an old bridge expression, I'm told, which is that one peak is worth 1,000 finesses. Thank you for the peek.
Thanks, Paul.
We have a question here. Would you stand and say your name?
I'm Joyce Stotts. I'm wondering if you have data on use of electric versus gas water heaters and ovens. Do they show the same ratio as you have for the dryer, or are they different?
The ovens do. I don't have a gas version of an oven, but the then we'll get to water heating next, because this is an electric oven right here. This is shown in 15-minute snapshots as opposed to 1 minute, but it's what it still does. It still drives up electricity use. And the gas equivalent, I know anecdotally, but it's real hard to tease it out because it doesn't tend to be on a separate circuit. So we're still working on precisely teasing that out. It's going to be around the 200-watt level versus the 3,700 watts max when electric oven's on. So it's a similar concept, though. Using electricity for heat is a generally inefficient use of electricity compared to some kind of flame. On the water heating, we are working to expand research with a specific focus on water heating and air heating in the homes and apartments, and to find out what are those differences there. We're told that, I'll give you, but here's anecdotally one thing we know. Blue Bonnet Co-op to our east has virtually no body of natural gas service in their homes. And Blue Bonnet Co-op's peak electric use season is not the summer, it is the winter. Yeah.
We have a question here from Dale Beulah.
When I discovered what my cable box was using, I went to the EPA's website, and they give you the list of all the different cable boxes. And when I saw it, that's when I unplugged my cable box. So now we just get we have about 50 channels that we can get without the cable box.
We did the same thing.
Sorry?
We did the same thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So although now they've taken the Weather Channel and CNBC off of that regular, anyway, I called Time Warner. I said, can I get an energy efficient cable? He says they don't exist. So is there a place to get a cable box that would be used with one of the cable companies here that would be a smart cable box, or do they just not exist anywhere?
I don't think they exist. Well, I don't think they're made. The maddening thing is that there's no technological barrier to them existing, right? It's just, you want to hear an even stupider thing that happened in our house? To get a cable rate, I had to spend a couple of hours negotiating with Time Warner. They insisted that I had to have a cable box to qualify for a lower rate. And I said, do I have to plug it in? I had to get a special dispensation to receive a cable box but not actually use it to qualify for a lower rate. I was like, I'm living in bizarro world here.
Pat, did you have a question?
Yes. We have an electric car, and when I listen to you, I think, should we not have an electric car? And no, I think electric cars are good. How do I balance all that?
So this, by the way, is the quick answer is you should get an electric car. But let me give you some specific numbers on this. They're not shown here, but it's important to put all this into context.
I saw that. We may not have time.
Okay. Home with and without electric car. But in other words, this is simply using electricity as opposed to gasoline. So what's happening when we're using gasoline instead of using electricity? So let's first ask this, okay? It turns out that our lives are filled with motors. If you go into your home is filled with motors. They're on your computers. They're on your television, actually. They're on your air conditioner compressor. They're in your refrigerator. There are two outlier devices that don't use an electric motor, the car and the lawnmower. And that's been because they were mobile. But there is a reason why the market has decided on electric motors on every other device that uses a motor. Electric motors don't have a decline in efficiency. They require a lot less maintenance. They're quieter. The problem was they had to be connected to electricity, or they had to have a battery, which was actually a pretty big problem when it came to cars and lawnmowers, or also like diesel generators and things like that, right? But in other words, we don't have gasoline cars because the internal combustion engine is an inherently more efficient device. If it is, we'd have internal combustion refrigerators and air conditioners. We don't. So the market has spoken, and the market says electric motors are more efficient than internal combustion motors when you can apply an electric motor. And they're faster, they're quieter, they have less maintenance issues, they have fewer moving parts, they don't degrade in performance over time. So it turns out that the Volt turns out to have a very neat comparison, neat from a statistical neatness perspective. The miles per gallon to go on gasoline on the Chevy Volt is 35 miles per gallon, EPA rated. And it turns out by just total lucky coincidence for us non-math majors like myself, is that the maximum driving range when you power the battery up fully on a Volt is 35 miles. It's more like 37, but 35 works out pretty. It's always good to average down for the skeptics. And so how much electricity does it take to juice up the battery for a 35-mile range versus to buy 1 gallon of gas to travel 35 miles? And it turns out that it costs you 4 cents a mile typically to drive on electricity and 11 to 14 cents a mile to drive on gasoline. So you're getting a 3x savings from running on electricity, which is an inherently more efficient technology than internal combustion as a general matter. So as a general matter, if you can run it on an electric motor as opposed to an internal combustion motor, as a general matter, it is going to be better for the environment and better for your pocketbook.
We have less than 2 minutes left.
Yeah.
First we want to thank you for a wonderful presentation, raising our consciousness. Could you conclude maybe with just a few summary statements?
Yeah, let me show you, thanks, Bonnie. I'm going to show you solar. I didn't get to this. But remember, we were saying how our whole systems are sized for afternoon air conditioning use, essentially. And this is solar generation, both south-facing solar panels and then west-facing versus the whole home. This was in August of 2011. This was the highest demand electricity use in the history of the state of Texas. Texas in August 2011 was the hottest month of any state in the recorded history of the United States. Yeah, so far. Yeah. July 2011 in Texas was the third hottest recorded month of any state at any time in the history of the United States. Oklahoma, August 2011, was the second hottest month ever of any state in the United States. And in our research, the people with solar panels were using just as much electricity generally, but they were almost totally off-grid because their solar panels were generating so much electricity during those summer afternoons that they were using virtually no electricity. Remember that $850 a megawatt hour time? That's here. Electricity that they weren't drawing from the grid, that difference. Homes as west-facing were only drawing 11% as much electricity off the grid. And so what this tells us is that there's a roadmap for how we get out of the jam we're in. And the first part of the roadmap is fortunately real low-tech and doesn't require a whole lot of thinking. It just requires going to Home Depot or Lowe's or Treehouse. Get more insulation. Go to a contractor. That part is real easy, and it makes an enormous difference. 45%, up to 45% electric savings. And the second thing is, it turns out, is that solar panels are getting a lot cheaper. And between having more insulation and having generation at your rooftop, you're able to actually go almost totally off-grid at the time of the year when we're sizing our entire systems for. And then the third thing is cars. So the cars, as they are electric, they use a lot less gasoline. They are a lot more efficient, require less maintenance. And so that's the key. As you look at the old 80-20 rule, right, which in liquor stores is 80% of the beer is bought by 20% of the customers. And which is my favorite example. But if you could do two things, which is get rid of coal power plants and get rid of the gasoline issue from cars, we'd knock out a big chunk, the vast preponderance of the climate driving issues. We could do that with more insulation, solar panels, and cars. The solutions are not complex, and most of them are ready to go today.
Thank you, Brewster. Let's give him a big hand. And I know he may be able to stay for a few minutes.
Sure.
And then there are materials in the back of the room for you to pick up and look at. Thanks again.